At the beginning of the movie, we see a woman named Helga calling pest control, telling them there's an insect in her house. From the way she talks, we understand that she suffers from memory loss. Then we see a man named Frank arriving at her home. As he enters her room, he notices a strange liquid coming out of a ventilation shaft, and it smells really bad. Frank doesn't pay much attention to it, then the doorbell rings. From his conversation, we learn that Helga had already contacted the pest control company before, and that some workers from the same company had come earlier, and their vehicles are still parked outside, meaning they haven't left yet, but Helga doesn't remember anything about them. Frank goes inside and starts searching for the insect. He hears a loud noise coming from the ceiling, so he follows it until he enters a room where he finds a lot of human blood. He gets really scared, and when he looks next to him, he finds a body. It turns out to be the man who came earlier to kill the insect in Helga's house. Frank immediately realizes that the insect must have killed him, so he starts searching more carefully, wondering how an insect could do something like that to a human. Suddenly, a giant spider appears in front of him, attacks him, and drags him into the ventilation shaft. Helga sees all of this and gets terrified, but because of her condition, she just sits down and watches TV like nothing happened. After a while, she suddenly remembers what happened, so she calls the company again and asks them to come catch the insect. Then the scene changes, and we go back 4 days earlier. We see a meteor hitting Helga's building, specifically the 7th floor. Inside the room of Gertrude, who is Helga's sister, a small spider comes out of the meteor. Then we see Charlotte, Gertrude's granddaughter, who lives in the apartment next door. She crawls through the ventilation shafts to go play with dolls at a woman named Nanny's place. After playing for a bit, she notices the meteor and sees the spider, so she grabs it, puts it in a matchbox, and slips it into her pocket. Suddenly, she hears Nanny's voice coming from a distance, gets scared, and quickly returns to her room through the ventilation pipes. When she gets back, she sees Helga busy with her work. Then, as she walks by, she sees Eric, who is actually a biologist and very focused on his work. When she finally reaches her apartment, Gertrude is already there. She's actually the owner of the whole building, and she starts yelling at her son, who is also Charlotte's stepfather, after finding out that Charlotte went to Nanny's room through the ventilation shafts. But Charlotte's stepfather manages to calm things down and gets Gertrude to leave. Charlotte goes back to her room, puts the spider in a jar, and starts observing it. Then her stepfather comes in again and asks her why she went to Nanny's place. From his words, we understand that there's no real family warmth in the house, and that his mother, Gertrude, even though she owns the building, still charges him rent. Also, his job as a comic book writer isn't going well. He advises Charlotte not to go to Nanny's room again and leaves. Outside, we see Charlotte's mother, Heather, who after marrying Gertrude's son had a baby. She asks Charlotte to take care of her little brother, then goes to Helga, who gets paid by Heather to look after her, especially since Helga suffers from memory loss. Charlotte spends some time with her brother, then goes back to her room to check on the spider. Suddenly, a cockroach appears next to it, so she kills it and is about to throw it away, but the spider makes a strange sound. Charlotte feels like it's asking for food, so she puts the cockroach into the jar. The spider devours it in one bite, even though it was much bigger than her, which shocks Charlotte. After that, we see her stepfather visiting a woman named Maria who lives in the same building, fixing her drainage pipe. After finishing, he goes down to the trash area because there's a problem with the door, fixes it, and then returns home. Meanwhile, Charlotte keeps killing more cockroaches and feeding them to the spider, which never seems to get full. It stays hungry and keeps eating non-stop. After that, Charlotte goes outside and heads to her stepfather, who is trying to write comic books. She helps him make his characters more appealing because he's really into action figures and that kind of stuff. Heather feels really happy when she sees them working together, but from what Charlotte says, we understand that she likes him, yet she doesn't feel like he's her real dad. Meanwhile, Tan, her stepfather, wishes she would love him like a father and fully accept him, but Charlotte just can't see him as a replacement. At night, Tan needs new ideas for his comic, so he goes into Charlotte's room. There, he notices the spider she's been keeping and gets really surprised because he's never seen anything like it before. Suddenly, Charlotte walks in and tries to distract him from looking at the spider way possible. He tells her to go to sleep, tucks her into bed, and tells her he loves her, but she doesn't respond and eventually falls asleep. After a while, the spider sneaks out of the jar on its own and makes its way to Helga's apartment through the ventilation system, which explains how it got there in the first place. The scene shifts to the next morning at Charlotte's home. From their conversation, we learn that Heather isn't comfortable living there and wants to move somewhere else. But the problem is that Tan doesn't have enough money to afford a new place. While they're talking, they suddenly hear a loud scream coming from Gertrude's apartment. They rush over and find her parrot, Mako, dead in a horrifying state, its body brutally torn apart. The sight shocks Tan and everyone else. At first, they think maybe a rat did it, but when Frank shows up and examines the body, he confirms that it must have been a dangerous insect, so he starts searching for it everywhere. At the same time, Charlotte is in her room with the spider. Suddenly, the spider hears a cat and starts mimicking its sound, acting like a real cat. Charlotte is completely shocked because she's never seen a spider do something like that before. She begins to think that this spider might be from outer space and has special abilities. Maybe it's the one that killed the parrot yesterday, especially since parrots are known for mimicking sounds. Maybe the spider picked up that ability from it. She wonders if it's some kind of alien or intelligent creature, or maybe even a hybrid spider. Charlotte then brings a bunch of cockroaches, kills them, and feeds them to the spider. While it's eating, a mothball suddenly appears in front of it, a type of insect repellent, and the spider is clearly afraid of it. That's when Charlotte realizes the spider's weakness, because every creature, whether from Earth or outer space, has some kind of weak point. Meanwhile, Frank still hasn't found the insect, so he starts spraying pesticide throughout the entire building. When he reaches Charlotte's room, she refuses to let him spray because of the spider. When Frank sees it, he tries to convince her that it's dangerous, but she doesn't listen, so he has no choice but to leave. As he exits the building, Gertrude meets him and gives him only a small amount of money for his work since he didn't find the insect. Frank gets upset, but she talks him into leaving anyway. Later that night, the spider escapes from the jar again and goes to Maria's apartment through the ventilation system. Maria is thinking about her family, who died in an accident, and her dog is with her. The spider bites Maria, then crawls into her body through her mouth, and kills her in a horrific way. The next day, we see Charlotte's family sitting at the breakfast table. Charlotte asks if she can go visit their neighbor Eric. He's a kind guy, but people think he's strange because he's a biologist. Tan agrees, so Charlotte goes to Eric's place, bringing the spider with her since it has grown noticeably bigger than the day before, which is clearly unnatural. When Eric sees the spider, he tells her it will keep growing every hour, so he wants to study it. Charlotte agrees to leave the spider with him for a while so he can learn more about it. After she leaves, Eric notices from the spider's behavior that it's hungry, so he decides to feed it insects. At the same time, Maria's dog sneaks into Tan's apartment through the ventilation system because it's scared. When Tan sees the dog, he immediately takes it and goes to Maria's place, but the door is open and the dog starts barking loudly. Tan enters the apartment, sees Maria's body, and is shocked. He calls the police to start an investigation, but they can't figure out how she was killed. The rest of the building's residents are in shock, since someone was killed in the same way as the parrot. After everyone leaves, Eric calls Tan and tells him everything about Charlotte's spider. After hearing this, Tan realizes the spider is extremely dangerous and is most likely responsible for all the deaths. He goes to Charlotte and yells at her, but she refuses to believe that her spider could hurt anyone because it has never hurt her. Charlotte gets upset and tells him he's not her father, so he has no right to talk to her like that. This makes Tan angry, and he tells her that her real father lives nearby and cheated on Heather so he wouldn't have to take her with him. After that, Tan tries to be a real father to Charlotte, but she becomes even more upset and goes to her room crying. It's only natural that kids that young wouldn't understand things like that. Meanwhile, in Eric's room, the spider gets out and kills all the animals, and it grows much bigger, causing serious chaos. At the same time, Heather is in Helga's room, and after finishing her work, she starts thinking about Tan and Charlotte, while Tan himself is feeling completely down. Suddenly, Gertrude comes in and yells at him because of the mistake that led to Maria's death. He leaves angrily and storms into his room. As for Gertrude, she goes into her room looking for the cat and hears its sound coming from the ventilation shafts. She tries to get inside to save it, but the spider has been waiting there from the start. Suddenly, the spider attacks her, leaves her in critical condition, and drags her through the vents. Tan, already furious, smashes the TV in a burst of anger, which provokes Heather and leads to a heated argument between them. Charlotte acts wisely. She picks up her little brother, goes to her room, and puts on headphones so she doesn't have to hear the fight. In the middle of the argument, the same spider shows up and attacks Tan and Heather in the same brutal way, dragging them through the ventilation system. Charlotte has no idea what's happening because she's wearing headphones, but when she comes out later, she sees a lot of blood on the floor and realizes that the spider is behind everything happening in the house. She also notices that her mom and stepdad are gone, so she understands that the spider took them. She rushes back to her room to figure out what to do. Suddenly, she finds the spider in front of her, and it takes her little brother from her. But then she remembers that the spider is afraid of mothballs, so she quickly crushes some, mixes them with water, and loads the mixture into a water gun. Then she goes to Eric's room to ask for help, but unfortunately, she finds that the spider has already killed him. So she quickly heads to Helga's room, knowing she has Alzheimer's, and is surprised that the spider didn't kill her, even though they have no connection and Helga never fed it anything. The truth is that Helga keeps mothballs in her pockets to repel insects, which is why the spider left her alone. Charlotte gives Helga the pest control company's number so she can call them, then decides to go into the ventilation shafts to save her family. She hears Tan screaming near the trash area, rushes over, and pours the mothball water on him to break the spider's webbing and free him, and it works. But unfortunately, the spider figures out what's going on and attacks Charlotte. She manages to push it back using the same mixture. Meanwhile, Helga has already called Frank to come over, which brings us back to the same scene the movie started with, meaning we're now in the 4th day. The spider tries to grab Frank, but he has a weapon and manages to fight it off for a while. However, as the water and the protective layer around Frank, Charlotte, and Tan start to wear off, the spider takes advantage and drags Frank away. Tan and Charlotte decide to save their family no matter what, so they head to the place where the spider is holding them. After searching around a trash container, they find Heather and the baby and manage to free them within seconds. The family reunites and hugs each other. Suddenly, the spider shows up again. They quickly look at the container door, but realize the system isn't working because the cable isn't connected to the remote. Tan quickly reconnects it, electrifying the water and knocking the spider unconscious. Then Heather presses the button, the door slams shut, and the spider is cut in half and dies. After that, Tan gets up, and everyone finally breathes in relief. Charlotte calls him Dad for the first time because he sacrificed himself to save her and the family. Tan cries while hugging her and tells her he's truly happy that she finally accepted him as her father. Then they all leave the container. In a post-credits scene, we see a large cluster of spider eggs suddenly hatch, releasing the same kind of spiders. That's when we realize the spider had been storing all those victims as food for its offspring. That's also why it stopped killing after it was full. It was preparing to lay eggs. It also seems like the spider realized people were starting to discover it, so it ensured the survival of its species through those rapidly developing eggs. These are details we didn't know before. And the chaos that started in that building isn't over. It's going to continue in an even more dangerous way, something Tan and his family have no idea about. As for Frank, the spider dragged him into the ventilation system and killed him. And that's how the movie ends. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.